Hey guys, it's Dan from Tour Overland, and I'm back with Jack just after he showed me around his very beautiful 110 Defender, and we're just going to talk about overlanding, a bit of travel, some of his stories and things like that.
Sounds good.
So Jack, how long have you been overlanding and travelling?
So pretty much since the start. So ever since I was born, really, my dad has been in a 1989 Defender 110,
Yeah.
Land Rover 110, and my childhood has been spent in that, in the middle seat, travelling around the world, really. So every single one of our school holidays was spent in that car. From the age of 4 or 5, the first trip we did that's really memorable to me, we went to Iceland with the school my dad was a principal at.
Nice.
Assistant principal. So we had 6 Defenders and we drove to Iceland. We got a ferry for a short period, as you have to, but I was 5 years old, and my earliest memories of overlanding are at the age of 5, Icelandic desert. We had the Katabatic.
Okay, so it's desert in Iceland.
Yeah, so it's a black black sand and rock desert. So it's just this sea of just black. It's very moon-like landscape. Everyone sort of compares it to how it would be on the moon. It is an amazing place. I was only 5, not the clearest memories in the world,
Yeah, sure.
but we had like the Katabatic winds. We were all in tents at the bottom of a volcano. We camped with 6 Land Rovers in a circle, huddled under an awning. But yeah, it's just some of the coolest memories of overland travel and what it could be were sort of planted in that trip when I was about 5, and my earliest memories are that trip and just
Okay, so sort of touch on there. So your dad was a principal at a school.
Yeah.
How does that work? That going to Iceland?
So it was basically a school residential. So my dad, it was a sort of, they called it challenge week. So you go away for a week or 2 as a kid at school, and my dad got the amazing opportunity to have a paid for trip where it wouldn't really happen anymore, I don't think, but 6 Land Rovers, lots of connections through school. Another teacher had a 110. So we got to take a school holiday. He got to bring his kids. I was one of them. And we did that with about, I think it was a group of 40 or 50 kids and crew in 6 cars. So it was, every car was filled with 9-10 people, all 110 Defenders.
And those were all brought over from the UK, or were there any sort of hired out?
No, all of us drove, and we drove across the UK, got the ferry. I'm not great on the exact route. Again, I was 5, but yeah, it was driving. It was a lot of driving. We did some glacial hiking and some actual rock climbing, and a lot of river crossings. So my earliest memories of off-road driving and just being absolutely obsessed with Land Rover's cars, driving, overlanding, just started there on me watching my dad put it in low range, put it in diff lock. We had someone with waders who used to wade in to all the crossings before we did them, to make sure they were safe. So we did sometimes 50 crossings a day on that Icelandic desert. There, it's really notorious for super fast flowing rivers.
Wow. Are you aware of any issues on that trip? Obviously, you were young.
Yeah.
But were there any breakdowns or people?
Definitely, there was some major stuff. So we had a really old, I think it was 80s 110 V8, 3.5 litre with carburetors. So not great with water.
Yeah.
Again, he set off knowing that he had a dodgy chassis. With a few days left of the trip, we were doing some rock crawly sections through the desert, flexing up as you do, and his chassis snapped in half. So
that's quite substantial.
Yeah, it was So that, again, my earliest memory of something going wrong in the Land Rover. Yeah, it was a red 110, and the chassis snapped, and they managed to ratchet strap, gaffer tape, cable tie, whatever, it back together, and we got it home. He drove it home with a chassis split all the way across the rails. So yeah, that was a bit like that's what that you can get out of quite a lot. It was that
is impressive.
Yeah.
Okay, and then with that, so you went with your dad there. There must be a story going further back with your dad? Because
Yeah.
did he just get into Land Rovers then, or was he into
So-
that for longer?
So my grandfather, my dad's dad, he was in the agricultural world. He was a lecturer and an agricultural advisor and grew up around farms. So
Yeah.
my dad worked on farms, best friends had farms. He loved Land Rovers from a very early age, from probably as young as I was, 4 or 5. He just loved the utilitarian thing. He loved how iconic they were, and he got one when he was about, I think, 22, 23, something like that. He got a Series 3,
Yeah.
and he loved them. He had that car and loved it, and sort of kept it going and learnt a lot. And from then he had 4 other Series 3 vehicles, and then moved on to the 110 he's got now, which is an 89. And he's had that since I was born. He got it year 2000 when I was
Nice.
born. So that's the car I know the best.
Well, and also if you think back in that sort of time as well, they weren't really the status symbol in the same way,
No.
I'd say, or that, almost lifestyle-led thing.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, they had a purpose.
Yeah.
They were workhorses.
I like to always hark back to that. Like it's an agricultural vehicle at its root. I mean, people were attaching ploughs on these in the 1950s. 1947, the first prototype. They were literally used as farm vehicles, inspired obviously by the Willis Jeep, drawn out on the sand. You guys probably know the story, but I love sort of thinking about what they were originally used for, and it's quite amazing how it's grown into what it is, and the community and what they're used for. And I think it's the simplicity. The thing that attracts me and my dad and to these cars is not having a great deal of knowledge initially, learning a lot from stuff happening with them, because they're classic vehicles, but then being simple enough to sort of understand and fix, and sort of I've learnt so much over the last 5-6 years of just owning this one, and sort of the skills and knowledge you get from owning a car like this is pretty invaluable for me.
No, it is.
Yeah.
'Cause what was your background of cars behind this? Did you have one before this, or was this your first?
This was my first proper car. I had an
Yeah.
old Peugeot as my first car, an old 306, that I loved cars, and I still really love cars, but I'll never not be in a Land Rover now. I think just my childhood, this one being a labour of love, having rebuilt it in 5 years to how it is now, from a really sort of poorly treated, poorly maintained car. It's been an amazing journey, quite expensive, quite stressful sometimes. But I love it and won't change it.
So how have you found that balance of sort of renovating it? Because I guess it is more of a labour of love,
Yeah.
isn't it, compared to
For sure.
a lot of people who aren't car people in any kind of way. They just want something which takes them from A to B and don't want any issues whatsoever.
Yeah.
How have you found that in terms of, has there been any times where you've doubted it? Or have you always just gone, oh yeah, that's gone, maybe that needs replacing, that's gone wrong, and I'm
Yeah.
fine with that, just crack on? Or
I always tell people the same thing. I take a lot of people in this car, friends, family, and they go, I really want one of these. And I go, I'm not sure you do really want one. You need to think about it, because I always say, if you don't love it, if you don't love the car and you don't love keeping it going, then there isn't much point in it to me. I think people love the aesthetic and the look. And I think if you don't consider the fact that you do have to spend a bit of money and time and effort to keep them going, I don't think they're worth it. But I think you form an attachment. They're very sentimental for me. It's been the shape and the noise of a TDI and that boxy look that I've had since I was born. And it's such a familiar thing. So every time I get into it every day, I smile every day still.
No, that's great.
It becomes a friend, which sounds a bit soppy, but sort of it is a deep connection. They're a beautiful thing to sort of.
Well, how did you come up with? Because you called it Wolf, your
Yeah.
car, don't you? So
Yeah,
where
yeah.
does that come? Where does that come from?
It's two reasons. It's military inspired. So the Wolf Land
Yep.
Rovers in the military, so they could be picked up by an aircraft. They were sort of lightened, and they were sort of troop carriers basically for the British Army. So it had a military look. It had the side lockers. It had that green sort of tone to it, and I thought, yeah, military inspired. And then the other reason was my dad's Land Rover is called Moose, which it got its name in Norway. So we got a moose sticker, and we saw lots of moose walking along the roads there when we did an overland trip there again with the school. He got his
Nice,
name
yeah.
Moose. My brother-in-law and sister have a 110 called Yak, white 110, which again they've done Central Asia a few years ago now for a year. They're now in Central America in the middle of a Pan American Highway adventure. So theirs is called Yak, Dad's is called Moose, and I went with Wolf. So they're all sort of pack animals. So it's yeah, two reasons, but yeah, that's
Nice.
why I went for Wolf. Yeah.
And you mentioned your sister
Yeah.
and brother-in-law. So
Yeah.
they're out there traveling at the moment?
Yeah, so they are about 7.5 months into a year and a bit trip. I think it's sort of 20 to 30,000 miles, a mega trip. David again has become a very good mechanic from those trips. Their YouTube, Yak Overland, if you guys want to check it out, it's great stuff. Ellie's really brilliant with that side of things. But yeah, they have had so many adventures, learnt so much, and yeah, it's definitely something I want to do in the future. But yeah.
So I guess with that, so seeing what they're doing, you must be a little bit envious of that. I mean, where would you go?
I think my dream overland trip. I think there are two. I think I'd really like to do Africa and just do a proper lap of Africa, all the hot spots, Botswana, Namibia, the game reserves. I'd really like to do a proper safari trip in this car in Africa. I actually FaceTimed Ellie and David. They're out in Central America in Guatemala this morning, and we were talking about another Central Asia trip which they've done, but they couldn't get to Mongolia. We want to go the whole hog and get all the way to Mongolia. There were issues with Russian borders at the time and what was going on in Ukraine. So I think some of the borders have reopened. So I think we would be able to get all the way to Mongolia with, I think, particularly this one and Yak. And I think if my dad would absolutely love to join us as well in his car. But yeah, I think those two trips, a Central Asia trip and then an Africa trip, those are the big ones. I love going to Wales. I do Wales pretty much every year with my work. I sometimes can't go as far afield, but you love it as well.
Oh, it is. Sort of in terms of the UK and where you can go and where you can legally drive as well.
Yeah.
There's no better. You've got proper wilderness.
Yeah, I think there are a few places in the UK where you can wild camp, you can drive fairly freely, and it is genuinely rugged and completely sort of natural landscape, uninterrupted by anything built up. And I think, I go back there every year to do some hiking and just take this and camp with my family. And I absolutely love Wales and what it's got to offer.
Yeah, and how have you found this in terms of the off-roady stuff?
I think they are unbelievably capable out the box. That's why I've not sort of messed with any geometry or tyres or wheels or gearing. I've kept it factory as it sort of in terms of the gearing and the wheels and the tyres and everything sort of that makes it so good out the box. I haven't changed. Yeah. I think the putting strain on certain things, if you uprate certain things and don't uprate other things, it can cause problems. I've had some bigger tyres. I've run certain things and sort of you chop and change. It's like Meccano. So I've sort of tested bits, seen what works for me. I like keeping it stock where I can in terms of the performance. It just seems I've never been in a situation where I either can't get myself out or the car's generally just...
Well, I guess is there a distinction there as well from my mind of more overlanding, off-road travel and just going off-road and looking to do as challenging stuff as you can, basically get stuck. Yeah, I think there is a bit of a difference there. Yeah. For me, I certainly enjoyed the overlanding stuff a bit more. Yeah, isn't it? It's just getting out there.
I think, on that, I think I've sort of turned more. When you're younger, you like to go out and have fun, go out and play, in the mud somewhere, where you're allowed to do so, of course. But I think my whole taste has changed slightly. I don't go out for the sake of just getting stuck or just going out to off-road. I like using tracks and off-roading to get somewhere to camp. I think a lot of the overlanding thing is iOverlander, another great shout out to a good app, really widely used by overlanders globally. Ellie and David sort of live by it. Spots that have been visited that are public access, you're allowed to visit them, often only accessible by 4x4. So using off-roading to get somewhere to a beautiful location to camp and sort of make some great memories and just enjoy, surroundings. I think using off-roading for that is where I sort of sit more so now, I think, with off-roading for me. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Well, I think, yeah, Wolf is very capable of that. I mean, I've been out, we've done a few drives on some of the trails around our way in South Devon.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's, yeah, easy peasy.
Yeah, it burbles along. It's not crazy powerful. It is, yeah, there's no ECU like, a more modern car like the D4. If something goes wrong, generally I can diagnose it quickly just by looking around. But yeah, the mechanical nature of the car means, yes, it's not particularly refined, but I think I wouldn't sacrifice, and I wouldn't change the engine or the car just for that reason, it being so simple. I think, yeah, it's super simple and just chugs along, really. Yeah.
Interesting. So if I were to pose you the question of a dream overland build or vehicle, so it doesn't even have to be a Land Rover. Okay. Is there something, or are you sort of sitting in it right now?
I say this quite a lot to friends and family. For me, I'm driving my personal dream car. I wouldn't change it. It's a fairly attainable dream car, and I'm really fortunate to be able to have it. And I love that I've built a lot of it with my family, with my dad and my brother-in-law David. We've been around this car since I've owned it and made it what it is today, and it's just come along so much. And I think, yeah, that sentimental attachment and just where it's gotten me, and the fact I've grown up with a car extremely similar to this since I was born, it stays with you. And it is my dream car. I love Audis, as you know. You had an old S4. I like cars. I really like some cool performance cars, but I would never have one over a Landy, particularly this one. I just sort of, I love them.
Well, I think particularly down where we are in a rural Devon, you need a vehicle. Yeah. Having one which is more capable in terms of just going off when weather's bad.
I think I've used it as well. So we've done a lot of stuff with the food bank. My mum is on the trustees for the food bank. I literally have bundled this to the ceiling with food for the food bank. I've towed with it for work. I've towed out countless vehicles that have been stuck. I used to work for Amazon. I used to tow vans out of places they shouldn't have been. Rescued friends, towed people on holiday. It's just been part of so many memories, I think.
No, that's one of the beautiful things with Land Rovers, and I think why people are so into them, isn't it? It is that ability to make some stories and experience things which you perhaps wouldn't.
I think the community thing is pretty unrivaled. I think the Land Rover community in general, in person and online, is just unmatched. I think it's unbelievable. The support, example, David and Ellie had a belt tension on the front of the engine that broke in Croatia a week into their Central Asia trip. They put something out on Instagram. Someone who was a Camel Trophy fan, Land Rover owner, drove his Camel Trophy Discovery 4 hours to a random town in Croatia to deliver them a belt tensioner so they could carry on with their trip. That happened within a day of them being stranded, and it cost them next to nothing.
I mean, there's something about driving Land Rovers abroad as well, because they're so ubiquitous in the UK. We see them all around the place, which is great. But as soon as you go on a continent, there's a story my dad has. Unfortunately, I wasn't there. It was him and my brother, where they got the ferry over to northern France in their my dad's sort of 90 TDI as well, and crossed over, and then the alternator packs up. There, and okay, we're a bit stranded and a bit buggered. We didn't bring a spare one, so they're sort of perched up on the side of the road, just a smallish French road, and then just happens to have a French man in his Defender drives past, stops by. And then he didn't speak very good English. No. My dad was speaking sort of pidgin French. But sort of a lot of pointing, gesticulating.
My dad does that as well,
And, sort of the French man got the idea, and he was like, I've got a spare one in my garage back home. So he whizzed off home. So half an hour later, comes back, delivers an alternator, which my dad is able to fix, because, again, they're so simple to work on. Just sort of
I think
bolt on.
That community thing, I've done quite a lot of solo travel, so all of my trips, in fact, so far in this car, apart from my family, has been solo travel, and I did sort of 3,700 miles across the Alps and Italy, Switzerland, obviously France, all the rest of it by myself in this car for 2.5 weeks as a holiday. And it's quite eye-opening when you travel by yourself. You learn a lot. And I sort of had a period where I was sort of slightly low. I was just sort of, missing family. It'd been a lot of time sitting in a cab, not talking to anyone. And I got to a service station, and a lovely Spanish family pulled up in their 110 and parked right next to me. And the kids were going crazy in the car. They saw another Land Rover, they were going crazy. And they got out and said, "I love your car so much." And the kids were climbing on top of it. I said, "You want to jump in the driver's seat?" We were getting pictures. They loved it. And it was just having that bit of socialising, having felt a bit sort of down in the dumps, and just, someone turns up with that common interest. We even drove each other's cars for a period just around the car. He said, "I've never driven a TDI. It's so cool. It's quite rare in this country." And we just had a great chat. And that was just a good example of the community thing.
I know
me,
it is.
yeah.
I think the community is worldwide, isn't it? And,
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think in my Disco 4, I'm on that edge of it's. Some people will wave, some people won't. Whereas when you're in a Defender, if you wave, everyone's pretty much going to wave back when they sort of
compulsory, isn't it? Yeah.
Compulsory. Whereas in the D4, less so. But I think I'm getting a reasonable share because it's clearly built for overlanding. It's not sort of a Chelsea tractor.
You can definitely tell when someone loves Land Rovers, regardless of what they're in. And if it's a newer one, it's a newer one. I love the Shed. I have no sort of attachment to Defender specifically, but that Land Rover thing, I think, you've got that common interest when you see someone kitting out like you have as well, for sure.
So considering how much you do love Wolf and the Land Rover, there must be some things you don't like so much.
Yeah. Well, you've got me on the spot here. I think keeping up with particular bits of maintenance, like, something you take for granted in a car, a door closing, something like that. That's something that fails on a car like this because it's a design from the, really from the 40s, but things just not working day to day, and you take them for granted in a car, little things you have to keep on top of. I think it sometimes can be frustrating.
Yeah.
Other than that,
you've seen there's loads of...
A bit noisy on the road, but actually nothing compared to some classic cars. It's fairly manageable. I think shoulder room, if you're a broader guy, and leg room, arm room, everything, it is quite cramped in one of these cars. You really got to sit in one before you buy one. If you're not used to it, I am. Done it my entire life. I've been in one of these. So I think, comfort is one that you need to look at.
Well, have you been in one of the newer, sort of newer engine with the Puma, where
I have.
Even then you've got
driven
slightly less space as well?
Yeah, I've driven a few. They are a bit quieter. They've got 6 gears. They're better, definitely better on the motorway, miles better. They've got that transit engine, so they're a bit more torquey and powerful. Again, I would not know where to start looking at one of those engines. That puts me off. They are a Ford Transit. They're more complicated in every way than one of these. Very similar underneath, but as soon as you get to engine electronics, sort of puts me off. But again, if you want something that's a compromise, has got the look, has got the, a lot of what this has, but it's slightly more refined and more easy day-to-day, Pumas, it is a good option. But for me, TD5 is the sweet spot. If you want the look and you want the simplicity and you want reliability, I think a TD5 is a great compromise if you don't want to do the TDI thing.
And they sound good as well.
They sound amazing.
Sound
a Remac TD5
yeah,
with a silencer delete is one of the best sounding things ever, I think, as a car guy. And they've got the ECU. You can remap them for economy, for power. They are super customizable and more drivable day to day, really. Yeah.
Well, no, Jack, thanks so much for joining on what is the first Tailgate Tale.
Yeah. I haven't got an actual tailgate. I'll call that,
I've got the door open. I've got my tailgates, which is a good see.
It's a useful feature, yeah.
Anyway, thanks for joining, and join us for the next time. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for our next one coming soon.